The hijackers were armed with. And in addition to having the box cutters, they were on a flight Tuesday morning. It happened to be from Newark to San Antonio, I believe, or was it Dulles to San Antonio? Newark to San Antonio. The plane, however, was grounded in St. Louis when that whole FAA ground stop, that unprecedented ground stop, occurred. The question is, was that perhaps a thwarted opportunity? Florida is another place where a lot of these suspects come up. 12 of the 19 suspects have a link to a Florida aviation school of some kind. 4 of them in all: flight safety, Embry-Riddle, a place called Huffman, and a place on the West Coast in Vero Beach, flight safety, Embry-Riddle, and one other. I'm not remembering it right now. Pardon me for that. Now, let's go over to San Diego. That's another place where at least 3 of the suspects were known to have lived. Nawak al-Hamzi, American Airlines 77, that's the one that went into the Pentagon. Khalid al-Midar, American 77, and Hani Hanjour, guess what? American 77. They all had links to San Diego. In addition, San Diego became a focus today as FBI agents went to a very well-known aviation education facility called the King Schools. They produce CD-ROMs for pilots, 40,000 of them a year, by far the largest in this field. The FBI searched their records to see if there were any matches. We're told there were. Quickly, in Pennsylvania, the cockpit voice recorder and flight data recorder have been recovered. At the Pentagon, the same thing. One of them severely damaged, the cockpit voice recorder damaged. Not sure how much information we'll be able to get out of that. That sort of brings us up to date. Also in New York, there was the arrest, which is perhaps bearing the lead a little bit, but this was the person who had the false pilot's license who had been arrested at JFK Airport on Thursday. Police say, if investigators say, he is a material witness to all of this. So it is a sweeping dragnet that is really a global dragnet at this point.
Global and across the country. I think that's one of the things that is just an extra sock in the stomach to so many people when you ask, where did these people come from, where they get where they get their training, and you find out right here in this country. I think it just has people shocked and amazed.
And living here for quite some time.
Living here, making ties, making friends, getting to know Americans. It's yet another sock. Miles, thank you for that update, that information. And with that, we'll go back up to Washington, D.C. and Judy.
Well, Darren, it's perhaps because of information like what we're hearing from Miles that President Bush today used the strongest words he has used since Tuesday's terrorist attacks. The president advised the military today to, quote, get ready to do whatever it takes to win this war. For the first time, the president labeled Osama bin Laden the prime suspect behind what happened. President Bush and his national security team are at Camp David right now, considering their next moves, we are told. And that's where we find our White House correspondent, Kelly Wallace. Kelly?
Well, Judy, you are exactly right. You can certainly say this is the strongest rhetoric by President Bush since Tuesday's attacks. In addition to calling on everyone in uniform to get ready, the president also asking the American people to be patient for what he says will be a sweeping and effective campaign against terrorists and those who harbor them. At the secluded presidential retreat in the Maryland mountains, President Bush huddles with his national security team and prepares the American people for war.
We're at war. There's been an act of war declared upon America by terrorists, and we will respond accordingly.
The president refuses to discuss military options, but for the first time, he specifically named suspected terrorist Osama bin Laden as a, quote, prime suspect behind Tuesday's terrorism spree. Bin Laden is believed to be hiding out in Afghanistan, with the ruling Taliban government providing him safe haven.
This act will not stand. We will find those who did it. We will smoke them out of their holes. We will get them running. And we'll bring him to justice.
When asked if those words mean President Bush is considering using ground troops to attack terrorists, aides say nothing has been ruled out. But winning this so-called war and finding the elusive bin Laden won't be easy, says a former Clinton administration official.
We're not fighting a military, we're not fighting an organized power, but we're fighting a very diffuse and shadowy organization that has links in many different parts of the world.
Knowing Americans are hungry for swift retaliation, the president uses his radio address to say a sweeping response will come in time.
You will be asked for your patience, for the conflict will not be short. You will be asked for resolve, for the conflict will not be easy. You will be asked for your strength, because the course to victory may be long.
And aides say President Bush has gained strength from his meeting Friday with more than 200 family members with loved ones still missing, believing his job is to turn their sorrow into something positive for future generations.
And while the American people are overwhelmingly supportive of a military response, keeping that support up will be another big challenge for the president, especially if a prolonged military attack results in some U.S. troops losing their lives. Judy?
All right, Kelly Wallace reporting from near Camp David, where the president is spending this weekend. And now I think we're back to Aaron.
Judy, thank you. Here in New York, funerals today for some of the firefighters who died have gone on. And down on the street, of course, the recovery effort continues. And about a block and a half away from there, on Wall Street today, they are beginning to check the systems out that will go into effect, presumably, all things go well, at 9:30 in the morning on Monday morning. And we'll be talking about that in just a moment or so, but we want to check down on the streets to see what is happening there. First, Richard Roth is down there. Richard?
Yes, Aaron, the search goes on here just a few blocks. The overview position here for CNN. One city official said the toll of those now missing, unaccounted for, has risen by about 200. It's gone up to about 4,972. Bodies of 2 firefighters were located underneath an old fire engine, they said, in front of the American Express building, kind of on the periphery of the main rubble area. Meanwhile, trucks continue to take thousands of tons of rubble out of the site. Instead of some of the noise of the vehicles, what you hear now are bullhorns from police security officials saying, please move back onto the sidewalk. This is because more New Yorkers, thousands on the east side of New York, have been allowed back, some for a short period of time, to get a look at their possessions and their apartment. One of those returning, the priority for John Solomon, was his pets.
I got the mice out.
So they survived for how many days?
Since Wednesday. I stuffed their tank full of food and 3 bottles of water, and they would never know there was a disaster.
So you did it before you left?
Yeah.
Another person who was there, another woman, was given a little bit more time, Carla Bauer, and Carla Bauer returned to her apartment. She's been living in the area of the World Trade Center for about 20 years. And she says she wants to stay. She does not plan to move out.
The thing that I was the most fearful of when I came back in here was looking out this window, because this was my view, and it was the World Trade and the Woolworth building. I've been here since 1981, and I refuse to let anybody push me out of here.
And, of course, Aaron, as you mentioned, the funerals are taking place. Mayor Giuliani was out on Long Island for the funeral for the fire chief of New York City, called it a very mournful, sorrowful day, but he believes that New York will show courage and the city will come out stronger for all of this. Aaron?
Richard, thank you. Thank you very much. As we mentioned, Monday morning at 9:30, after virtually an entire week of being shut down, the markets never opened on Tuesday, I don't believe. Wall Street, New York Stock Exchange, the Amex, the NASDAQ gets back to work. Greg Clarkin is here. I read somewhere, I think this is correct, that area around the street, Stock Exchange, is the largest user of telecommunications equipment in the world. And all of that's being checked out today is pretty much it, because it is the bread and butter of making the system work.
Exactly, Aaron. It's a vast telecommunications system, and this morning technicians at the NYSE, as well as at the NASDAQ and the member firms, are really going over the telecom systems, the voice and data systems, to make sure everything is intact and up and running for 9:30 Monday morning. And right now we're getting word that, barring any last-minute snags, we will indeed have stock trading. The equity markets will resume trading on Monday morning at 9:30. Now, again, the tasks to restore trading were monumental in the eyes of many. You have that vast telecom network, the voice and data that hooks up not only the folks down on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange, but folks at other member firms on different locations. So you had to make sure all the bugs were worked out of that. And indeed, the New York Stock Exchange CEO and Chairman Dick Grasso this morning saying that right now all systems are go. They are very, very hopeful that they will indeed have trading on Monday morning. And Grasso said not only is it important to get the equity markets back up and running for the economy and for the overall world equity markets, but also it holds a deep, deep symbolic value here in America.
to send a very important message to the criminals who so heinously attacked this country that they've lost. The American way of life goes on, business recommences.
And Aaron, at this point, again, Barney, any last-minute stacks? They expect to have stock trading. You'll hear that opening bell for the first time since last Monday.
And they have, I don't know the detail, but I can't imagine they have anything less than something important and symbolic planned for that opening.
It will indeed be something to see. They're going to have the opening bell at 9:30, as tradition has it, and then they'll have 2 minutes of silence, a rendition of God Bless America, and the opening bell will be rung by various political officials as well as representatives of the New York Police Department, Fire Department, Port Authority, and the emergency services units here. So it's expected to be quite an emotional time as a lot of folks, about 3,000 folks to be exact, file back onto that floor for the first time in about a week or so.
I'm not sure exactly all the reporting you've done, so if I'm about to blindside you, I apologize. Have you talked to any of the traders down there at all? Are they nervous about both the mechanics of Monday and the emotions of traders, professional and otherwise?
Absolutely. In terms of the emotional aspect, it is very close to the trade center, and it's a tight-knit community. A lot of folks, new people, no doubt, in the trade center, so there'll be a big emotional aspect. As far as the mechanics of the market go, there is some apprehension over just how the system will hold up, as well as what the market's going to do. A lot of folks expect to see a bit of a steep sell-off, at least early on, led by the airline stocks, the insurance stocks, which are especially going to be hard hit. On that note, the SEC has eased some regulations temporarily to help to kind of ease trading and stabilize trading a bit.
What does that mean?
Basically, they'll allow companies, they lifted restrictions temporarily to allow companies to, on the amount of stock they can buy back, when they can buy it back.
Their own stock.
Exactly.
And that would have the effect of stabilizing the price?
Exactly, restoring confidence to that particular equity. And
you got to understand, you're talking to a guy who barely balances his checkbook, okay? But that would stabilize the price.
Exactly, and again, restore confidence not only to that equity, to that stock in particular, but to the markets in general in case there is a steep sell-off in some of those individual stocks.
And we know, because we had trading around the world over the course of last week, even though we didn't have it here, that the markets, in fact, have been pretty choppy, but they seem to be stable at the end of the day.
Exactly. They did get off to a rocky start, and a lot of folks believe that the 4-day prolonged shutdown is the longest since 1933. They believe that the last couple of days maybe will serve to stabilize the markets rather than drive them down even lower. But either way, a lot of folks are calling or expecting to see at least a sell-off at the very, very outset of trading.
Yeah, markets hate a lot of things, and instability is right at the top of the list.
Exactly.
Thank you. Nice
Sure.
work. Just came across one quick thing I want to pass along. 20% of all the office space in the city was down there affected by that explosion. 20%. Judy?
Well, Aaron, the building here in Washington, where, of course, all the focus of recovery has been on, of course, is the Pentagon. Workers there continuing, as you know, throughout this day, as they have every day since Tuesday, working on that damaged building, trying to pull whatever out they possibly can. Inside, meantime, the work continues on what officials are signaling will be a strong United States military response. And for the very latest on that, let's turn to CNN's military affairs correspondent, Jamie McIntyre. Jamie.
Well, Judy, Pentagon officials, of course, are not talking in any detail about what military options the Pentagon may be considering in this war against terrorism, although privately Pentagon officials are downplaying any expectations that there could be an immediate response. Saying that intelligence needs to be analyzed, that needs to be matched with military options, and that any action will be prudent. Meanwhile, action is fully underway to rebuild one of the nation's most impressive symbols of democracy, and that is, of course, the Pentagon building. Even though the focus is on the people here, the building itself has a strong symbolic value, and the Pentagon announced today that they will rebuild this section of the building as quickly as possible. It may take a couple of years, but they let the first contract today, $145 million for a contractor to begin the work. They're going to need to shore up part of the building and put in new, strip away some of the damage, remove about 350 million pounds of debris in order to demolish some of the sections all the way down to the concrete columns and floor slabs. And they say when they rebuild this, they will be rebuilding space that's equivalent to more than 2 Empire State Buildings. But announcement today that work will get underway. This did hit a part of the building that had just been refurbished using some up-to-date fire-resistant and blast-resistant materials, and they said that went a long way to keeping the death toll down. The death toll now about 125 people in the building plus the 64 on the plane. But again, an announcement today that work will be getting underway very soon, as soon as they've completed the task of recovering all the possible remains, to begin rebuilding the Pentagon and get it occupied again as soon as possible. Judy?
All right, Jamie McIntyre bringing us the latest from the Pentagon. Now, Aaron, back to you.
Thank you. I believe this is going to work now. We're joined from Reno, Nevada, with retired Marine Corps General Martin Bragner. General Bragner is here to talk to us a little bit about some of the challenges that are facing the President, his military planners, and soldiers on the ground as well, as they begin a process of trying to figure out who is responsible for this and what to do about it. General Bragner, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Aaron.
Look, I'm no military mind here, but the first problem seems to me, it's not like we know where the enemy is in a sense. There's not some big army. We can get a satellite picture of them, see them staging and all of that. So one assumes the first thing is, how do you find them?
Well, it's, of course, extremely complex problem, and it's intelligence dependent. I am certain that right now the military planners are looking over all the information they could possibly acquire from a host of sources in order for them to better identify the attackers, where they're located, who is harboring them, who is supporting them. And I'm certain that they're going to discover that, and they already know this, that they are in a wide variety of places, not just one location, and that this kind of an attack was obviously carried out by a host of cells in various parts of the world.
So you're in reducing this to a perhaps too terribly simple way. You're not talking about a shotgun approach where you can go in and drop lots of bombs over a wide area. You really need a kind of a pistol approach where you find a target and go get them.
I think that's right. You know, there's a thought that the President has made clear, and that is that we are going to hold nations responsible for those who harbor and support these terrorists. But to actually get the terrorist cells themselves and break them down and destroy them, it's going to have to be very pinpoint and very accurate, and done in a manner that will ensure that these cells are in fact destroyed, along with the network that supports them. This is not a very short-term project, obviously.
I want to talk about that broader military problem in a second, but let me just, if I can, ask a couple more questions about the more surgical aspect of this. Are there military units, Marine, Army, whatever, that are trained to perform those kinds of actions?
Yes, there are. Both the Army and the Marine Corps have units that are capable of special operations. Highly risky. I suspect that there would be a very significant amount of intelligence gathering done before any kind of an operation like that would be launched. But yes, the capability does exist.
And have we had much success with these sort of operations in the past?
Well, we've had success on limited times that are not very well publicized. Of course, you look back to Desert One, which was a terrible disaster, and that was really the genesis of all these special operations forces.
Just for people who don't remember, Desert One was, if I'm wrong, jump in here, but was the effort to rescue the Iranian hostages, correct?
That's correct. That's correct.
And that was a disaster on the ground.
It was.
Yeah. And then there was the attempt to get Gaddafi a little less than that ago, and that didn't precisely work either, did it?
Well, the end result of that particular effort, however, did come about that Gaddafi has essentially been put out of work and has kind of hunkered down. So I think you can say that that particular effort did result in a desired outcome.
But at best, we've had a mixed record in these kinds of operations. The military is much more comfortable in a more classic battle.
Well, I would say that right now the special operations forces we have are extremely competent. I worked with them. I know how good they are, and I have every confidence that if they were ever called upon to exercise their mission, they would do it in a very professional way. And they did, of course, do a variety of things during the Gulf War, and they were very, very successful at that.
Right, and I wouldn't suggest for a minute that they weren't professional. I merely suggest this is very hard to do well and successfully. It had a lot of risks, a lot of moving parts, and a lot of things that can go wrong.
Oh, absolutely, and that's why I think you'll find that before any kind of an operation of that nature is conducted, that there will be very, very careful planning, a very substantial gathering of intelligence to eliminate as great as possible the margin of error.
We have grown as a country, the United States, used to these air wars where you could keep ground soldiers out of harm's way and you drop some bombs and hope that works. The end result of this is more complicated, isn't it? I mean, if you go after governments, do you see this as simply an air war?
No, I don't. I think one is that you have air power, which is very capable. It's going to be mixed with a variety of other kinds of actions, and I cross the spectrum of economic sanctions, embargoes, forming alliances that will act in concert against these countries, and as well as military action. So it's going to be long range. It's going to be very, very complicated. I think you'll find that the military activities that occur are going to be selective. They'll be very aggressive and probably in some cases massive, but I think you're going to find that it's going to be a longer term, very carefully orchestrated effort on a magnitude that we have not seen before.
Which raises a whole different set of questions which we'll get to in the days ahead. General Bradner, thanks for joining us. Martin Bradner, retired Marine Corps General, joining us this afternoon from Reno, Nevada. Thank you, sir. It's nice to talk to you. To Atlanta, Darren.
Aaron, thank you very much. We're going to keep it on the military theme here and talk about military reservists. As you probably know, President Bush has given the authority to call up as many as 50,000 reserves to active duty, and already many reservists have volunteered to join that effort. So far, apparently there's requirements for 35,000 reservists, including 10,000 from the Army. Turns out our Leon Harris is at Rangers Joe Army and Navy store. That is in front of Fort Benning, Georgia. He has more reaction to Tuesday's attacks and, even more importantly, what lies ahead. Leon, hello.
Hi, Darren. Good to see you. Good, nice to hear your voice. And you're not going to believe that some of the comments that we've been getting from people here, even just moments ago. It's not just the reservists who are getting all fired up right now. We've seen come in here probably 10 disabled ex-veterans. Disabled veterans are those who were formerly in the military. And do you know what they've been telling us to a man? That they would give up their 100% disabilities to get back in, to get a chance to go over and do something. That kind of sentiment is really coming up to the surface around here. We're standing in front of a place, Ranger Joe's, which is a really unusual place. They've got pretty much anything that you could imagine buying that's related to the military. We've seen civilians and enlisted men alike coming in here, men and women, I should say, coming in here and buying things from, we've seen gas masks being sold, we've seen you name it. They've been looking for mirrors to search under vehicles. We've seen all kinds of gun paraphernalia, uniforms. But you know what the hottest selling commodity here today was? United States flags, the stars and bars. They came in here this morning, and people were here lined up around 8:30 this morning trying to buy some. The place was sold out. They didn't even open up until 9. They said the first shipment they would get in, and maybe the only one they'd get in, would be around 1 o'clock. You know what happened? The place was jam-packed. It took the driver 8 hours to make the run to Alabama to get the flags, and when they came back in, they were gone in 90 seconds. We sat here and counted it. It was an unbelievable scene. But you know what? While we were sitting here listening to the hubbub there as people were scrambling, and very politely so, over those flags, it seemed as though we detected a shift in the sentiment that people were expressing. They've gone from handling their grief to trying to get ready to dish some out on their own.
Well, it's, I think, our biggest chance to prove what we really got, you know, give them all we can. And I think payback's in order. And they're going to pay.
You know, they've got haircuts they're giving here in the back while guys are getting their uniforms pressed. But right next door is Tattoo Tommy's. And we counted more than a handful of guys who've gone in there feeling that now is the time to express their patriotism by getting tattoos. We've seen eagles and flags and you name it. And there's been no shortage of guys going in there who have personal connections to the tragedies in Washington and in New York. And on a final note, you know what else I just learned they have been selling out of today, in addition to the flags? the little black bands that officers have been wearing in honor to commemorate those of their comrades who have fallen in this tragedy. They are all sold out of those as well, sad to say. Darren, back to you.
Leon, on the equipment that people are buying, is it because they're just trying to get in the spirit, or you think they're really getting ready because you think that they're soldiers who are ready to head out?
Well, you know what? The soldiers have been instructed to not talk to us. And it's not because they've got a problem with CNN or anything specifically. It's because they don't want to give away anything. They don't want to give away just how prepared they really are. But off the record, off camera, they've all told us that they are really taking this very, very seriously, and they're going through every step. They want to make sure that they've got every single thing that they need down to the last item, and that's why we've seen, I mean, this parking lot, as you can probably see over here, you may not be able to see, has been jam-packed all day from guys coming in and girding themselves up and getting ready for whatever is to come.
Understandable. Leon Harris at Fort Benning, Georgia. Leon, thank you. And now we go back up to Washington, D.C. and Judy.
Well, Darren, air travel is something we're all watching. Slowly, it is returning to normal across the country. Boston's Logan International Airport reopened today. That's the first time since Tuesday's attack. And, of course, that was where 2 of the 4 flights that were hijacked originated from. This morning, this very morning, a man was pulled off of a flight at Logan that was headed to Atlanta. And he was, it was described, he was engaging in suspicious and rowdy behavior. Now, all 3 of New York City's major airports are now open, but under tighter security. Out in Los Angeles, at International Airport there, expects to be running at 25% capacity, they tell us today. That would be the equivalent of about 500 flights. Here in Washington, our Washington Reagan Airport is the only airport in the country that remains completely closed. Some activity out there right now. For that, let's go to Kathleen Koch. Kathleen, what's going on?
Well, Judy, the Department of Transportation made a decision late this afternoon to begin to allow those aircraft that were stranded here Tuesday to get back into circulation. So at 4 p.m., they opened this airport for flight crews only to board the 42 commercial aircraft, the 12 air taxis, and the 70 general aviation aircraft that were stuck here. Allow the flight crews to begin boarding those aircraft and getting them up into the air. So between 4 and 7 this evening, this airport is open for those flights to go out. Also between 10 and 4 tomorrow and Monday. An interesting note, Judy, though, we are not seeing any of these aircraft take off to the north toward the city. Of course, this airport is just across the Potomac River from Washington, D.C., and that is one of the reasons that the Federal Aviation Administration has temporarily closed it down, temporarily and indefinitely, because with aircraft taking off and landing here at speeds of 140 to 150 miles an hour, pilots tell us that in less than in a minute, one of these aircraft could veer off into the White House, the Pentagon, and there would be little that anyone could do about it. Judy?
All right, Kathleen Koch bringing us up to date on the very latest at Reagan National here in Washington. Thanks, Kathleen. And now to Aaron in New York.
Thank you, Judy. One of the great joys of flying in and out of Washington is flying out of National and seeing the Capitol. I don't suppose any of us will look at that quite the same again. Just as we're learning more about the people who hijacked the plane and their lives and what they had been up to the last several years, we're also learning more about the passengers who were on those planes and their lives. In this case, a story about someone on board American Airlines Flight 11, which crashed into the World Trade Center on Tuesday. Here's CNN correspondent Ann McDermott.
This is supposed to be such a happy time for Kelly Lee. She's just had a baby, her second little girl. But just 2 days before the birth of Allison Danielle, Kelly's husband Dan was killed. He was on board American Airlines Flight 11 on Tuesday morning.
This doesn't seem possible or believable yet to me, so I just keep expecting him to come back or walk in the door and be here at some point.
Dan was a stage carpenter for the Backstreet Boys and left the tour in Boston to come home for the birth of his baby.
He called at 2 a.m. that morning, his time in Boston, and he just said, you know, he'd be home soon, and he loved us.
Later that morning, when Kelly saw that all hell was breaking loose in Manhattan, she called her family. She called Dan's friends.
Because we kept hoping Tuesday that he'd missed his flight. He overslept her because he'd only had like 3 hours sleep before the flight. And they said all he could talk about was how happy he was to come home. So they knew he'd be on it.
And he was. And now his oldest daughter keeps breaking Kelly's heart over and over again. She's been told her daddy is dead, but she doesn't know what that means.
She keeps telling me he'll be back in 5 minutes. He'll, don't. She's asked to call him and tell him she loved him on the phone.